Today we are talking about media and its relation to AI search, right? And I think this is going to be a really, really fun conversation. So I'm here with Jackson Wightman, founder of Propaganda and author of the Tech PR Playbook. And we're going to talk about how you can get your brand found even with or especially with AI search. And now that we are officially live on LinkedIn, welcome to the show, Jackson.
Great to be here. Thank you, Lee.
Yeah, okay. We've got through all the technical difficulties. Let's jump into the conversation. All right, let's start big picture here because we're talking about being found in AI when people are searching in AI. And we're going to talk about specifically, utilizing PR and placements for that, which is really cool because I think that as you mentioned on our before we jumped on here, PR is not really ever had his day in the sun, and now here we are, and it's pretty exciting. So let's start kind of big picture and look backwards for a few, maybe a year, 6 months. Should we? There's been a huge shift in AI search. Obviously, ChatGPT and others. Um, but people are shifting away from Google, and I know myself, I have, and I can give some instances of how I use it, and how I don't use Google anymore for certain things. Should we throw the proverbial baby out with the bathwater yet when it comes to Google search, or is there some kind of middle ground that how we should be thinking about how we're utilizing different search platforms now?
It's a great question because certainly in my profession, and certainly when you listen or hear PR people talk these days, it's as if Google's blue link business has just disappeared overnight and it's
Yeah,
gone forever. Google's blue link business is a good business, billions in revenue. If traditional SEO is working for you, you should absolutely continue putting money into traditional SEO. As you alluded to, and as you began with, traditional SEO, Google's traditional blue link business is starting to decline. It's declining very rapidly. I believe the statistic was last March. For the first time, it dropped below 90% of the search market. So it had always been this big behemoth. The game is changing. More and more people are using AI engines as a window on the internet, as the window of discovery when they search for
yeah,
things on the internet. So it ain't over yet. And it's going well for you. I'd say keep doing it, but
yeah,
understand that this is the direction it seems to be going in pretty unequivocally. And I
yeah,
think evidence to that is that Google is throwing AI mode on a lot of searches unprompted.
yeah.
So it's even recognizing this is the way we're going.
Yeah, for sure. And you're getting some, better. It's almost like now that we know that you can get the answer from the data in the way that you can from ChatGPT, now Google's like, okay, well, we'll give you more, we'll give you more of the answer up front, which is sort of like a sandbag move almost. But, and I don't know if it's them just catching up or if they all had this technology all along or for some time. But when I've used ChatGPT specifically, I use it a lot. It's my go-to type of. I even now will forget to sometimes go to YouTube directly, for searching for certain types of things and certain ways that I want to consume them for information. But I'll go to ChatGPT easily before I'll go to Google. But I will still go to Google for certain things if I'm looking for articles or whatever it may be. I have an Android and I love the Android. I'm not a big iPhone fan, so I'll use Google Maps and so the ecosystem I'm still playing in for sure. But I have very much shifted, and for my work and my personal side, over to ChatGPT. Now, from what I see is I'm one of many, but not all, who have done that. I think there's still, especially an older population, who are just finding out about Google. Like they're just getting to Google, and they're getting the better version of Google. But I think you're right that it's shifting for sure, but it's not a landslide. It's going to take some time for adoption in various ways of how people use it.
It certainly is. And you touched on a theme that I was happy to hear you touch on because I wanted to mention it. One of the current things that we're struggling with, and I think one of the big data gaps out there, is how do how does the AI engine use change based on certain psychographic, situational,
Mhm.
demographic factors. So, for example, I've seen some data that suggests older people, sort of the 65 and above set, when they use AI, they're using Microsoft AI.
Yeah.
That's really not something I ever do. I doubt it's something you do.
No.
Most people in our world are probably talking ChatGPT. They may be talking Google. They may be talking Perplexity and Claude. But it'll be really interesting. And I think one of the big data gaps is how do a company's customers, what AI engines are they using and when? So if you are going after a Gen Z customer, what does that mean you should optimize for? Because the way you optimize for ChatGPT, particularly if we're talking about how ChatGPT and PR intersect, the way you optimize for ChatGPT is going to be different than the
Yeah.
way you optimize for Claude or Perplexity because ChatGPT is scraping different sources often.
Mhm.
So you want to go and get the placement in, outlet X versus outlet Y. But as I say, where we lack data in aggregate at this point is understanding how demography impacts AI engine choice and whether AI engine choice changes in situations. Because as you alluded to, you might use ChatGPT for this type of query. You
Mhm.
might go to Perplexity or Claude for that type of query.
Mhm.
And I haven't seen a lot of data on that. And I think it's something that will be really interesting as it fills in because
Sure.
certain engines are used certain times by certain people.
So before we get into what you do for your clients or kind of like the secret sauce there, I wanted to make a bridge here to that conversation by talking about demographics and on the other side. So if we're looking at behavior, we're looking at habits that are changing, we're looking at demographics. Um, are you then going, over indexing your model or your service or the type of clients you work with for the solution to match with their customer set, their target audience being the younger, group or tech focused group? I think if you're working for tech companies, people who are searching for solutions for those tech companies, right? That's your client, let's say,
Yeah.
are more apt to use ChatGPT versus Google. I don't know, maybe I don't know. So therefore, your impact that you can have as a PR expert, I would think would be higher. Is that the right way to think of it, or how are you approaching the market?
It is the right way to think of it, I think. And the way we are approaching it is to tell every client survey your customer base first,
Mhm.
because you might be surprised that you think they're using ChatGPT, but for whatever reason, given the category you're in, given the nature of the problems or set of problems your products solve, they
Mhm.
might be using Claude. And the
Okay.
program we need to bring to fore, especially the places we need to target
Mhm.
to optimize for Claude, are going to be different than the things that we would need to do to optimize for ChatGPT. So it
Gotcha.
starts with surveying and understanding where your customers are and what AI engines they're using and when they're using them.
Okay, so let's dig into that then first is their behavior is what's happening when they're using. I mean, I know my own experience and work and personal, and I can tell you how I use it, but yeah, I think everyone else is using it the same way, but it's not most likely not true. I mean, there's probably a million ways to use the tool. What I mean by like, there's lots of different features, but I mean, when you approach it with a habit or an idea or a query, what are you finding there? Like, how are people using these tools so that
Yeah.
you can inform your clients?
It's an interesting question. So and these are aggregate responses. So
Sure.
understand as the listener of this conversation, these might be not be responses directly relevant to your situation,
Exactly.
your
Yeah.
company. It's really interesting. I think, and this is where brand perception comes in. And obviously the brand equity and the brand perceptions of these AI companies is changing and is being formed and is absolutely not static. These are not Coke and Pepsi at this point. These things that
Sure.
haven't been around that long. So
Right.
in our experience, perplexity is often viewed as a kind of a tool for deeper research. So situationally, it may be used for that. ChatGPT seems to be used more as kind of the everyday engine from what we see, and there isn't aggregate data about usage and volume of usage at this point that's publicly available,
Right.
at least not that we've seen. But ChatGPT is kind of the more everyday usage. Google is obviously something that people use as a result of just searching in Google and Google's brand being associated with search.
Mhm.
Lesser engines, the Microsofts, the Claudes, and those things are used more situationally. We can't really define a picture of that. So just understand, I think that the way people see these things differs, and
Yeah.
people think, okay, if I've got a deeper question, if I need research, I'm going to go to Perplexity, partly because it's been framed that way by
Mhm.
the company. ChatGPT has been framed in a different way, I think, and Anthropic has framed Claude another way. So
Mhm.
begins with surveying, but that's what we're seeing in aggregate so far, is that Perplexity is kind of the nerd of the bunch. ChatGPT is more the cool kid in the cafeteria,
Yeah.
and Google is a default thing used as a result of Google's association with search.
So is Google sort of becoming the old, IBM or Microsoft, in terms of how people think?
It's a good question. I think it's too early to say, but I think there's definitely that possibility. Again, I think the brand equity and the brand association with search is going to prove to be very sticky.
Mhm.
We finally do see volume data. It'll be really curious to see how that all shakes out. But I think that look, that's a possibility. It's also a possibility that the intense brand association with search is just going to carry over and be very powerful in an AI search world. My
Yeah.
own experience with Google, and I'm not sure if this dovetails with yours or your listeners, but my own experience with Google AI mode is that it works pretty good. I've had fine experience with it so far. It's not noticeably better or noticeably worse, in my opinion, than the other engines, the other options that folks have.
Okay, let's get into the nuts and bolts now. So, I think you work with a lot of tech companies. What other kind of companies do you work with?
We are doing primarily tech. We have
Tech. Okay.
some lifestyle crossover as well.
Sure.
Some of our tech is B2C, the majority of it. Some of it is also B2B.
Gotcha. Okay. So we'll focus on tech companies then. What do they need to know about showing up? I mean, what should they keep doing from a visibility standpoint? And then what should they think about doing different?
So the first thing, and I believe that most tech companies, I believe most people understand this. AI search, generative engine optimization, if we're going to call the discipline that for the purpose of this conversation, brings together a lot of seemingly and maybe previously disparate realms. Not
Mhm.
entirely. I mean, traditional SEO sort of did this, but you're absolutely touching on back end dev work. You're talking about site architecture and the readiness of a website at that level for how crawlable it is by bots, how easy it is for bots to kind of get around and find what they want to find. So
Yeah.
there's that element. There's that dev back end element. There is an element that touches on kind of content marketing and PR that really revolves around signal clarity. And it's
Mhm.
about sort of how are we, when we go out into the world, whether that's being quoted in a news article or when we are writing content under the byline of a CEO, or when we're appearing on a podcast, are we sort of singing from a similar coherent hymn book so that bots who are crawling the web looking for answers are not getting confused? So signal clarity matters, touches on a few realms, touches on sort of, you know, executives and their personal brands, touches on kind of PR, touches on elements of marketing, particularly content marketing. And I think those are the things that people need to think about. That's where you start. You start by sort of thinking about these three realms. Most tech companies seem to be pretty good at that.
Yeah. So
Um,
is that like infrastructure? Like when it comes to content, would you consider that like sort of an infrastructure layer?
it's an infrastructure layer, and
Okay.
then it's a sort of what I would call a signal clarity layer. And
Okay.
a lot of the work that we are doing um, is really around signal clarity, is really around making sure. And I think that's always been the enterprise of PR, is making sure
Mhm.
that message clarity is there, and maybe the enterprise of marketing as well. But more and more, you need to be ultra clear and singing from the same hymn book in
Yeah.
ways that is not going to confuse the bots. The way I sort of characterize this, and every company has ideal customer profiles, ICPs, if we're
Sure.
getting all marketing and PRE with acronyms. It's an affliction of mine. Sorry for that.
Yeah.
Um, like RAG bots, the bots that ChatGPT sends out when queried, are absolutely an ICP for every company in the world right now. And you need to sort of tailor architecture, messaging, and all of that as if they are an ICP. The same way your ICP might be grandmas in Illinois or something. You
Mhm.
need, to consider RAG bots an ICP and design things specifically for them.
Okay, so as I recall, and this is not the space I play in every day, but as I recall over the last, I don't know, say 5 years or so, the wisdom has been to write for humans or create content for humans, not for Google.
Mm,
And if you create authentic content that is, answering questions that your actual human targets would have,
mm,
then you're gonna probably hit the mark for Google as well because that's what they're looking to surface.
mhm,
So now as we move into this new age of kind of writing for ChatGPT or Claude or whoever,
mm.
does that change? Are you still writing for the human or are you writing for, a version of the human?
It's interesting. And you and I lived through keyword stuffing and
Yeah.
wonderfully horrible content
Because
because
I have
well,
to imagine, like, here we go again, right? Like, this
yeah,
is probably gonna be the another version of what happened before, just it's not keyword stuffing, it's some other, you
it
know
it and I think, you know, I'm not exactly happy to tell you this or your this, but I think that we are absolutely this is inevitable a little
Mhm.
bit, particularly as we're in the Wild West moment, right? We're in the sort of
Sure.
land grab, try everything moment for this thing called geo,
Mhm.
and there's going to be a range of really crappy things that come out of that. We're already sort of seeing that.
Yeah.
But if you think about content optimization for geo, so one of the best practices is that you want to write headlines like a question, the way somebody would search in an AI engine. So,
Yeah.
what are the five best headphones on the market for runners or some such
Mhm.
thing? Um, you're going to be seeing that. Is that necessarily as painful as a keyword stuffed article from SEO 2015?
No.
Absolutely, it's not, in my
No.
opinion. But I do think that at the end of the day, it will probably shake out the same way. And the sort of advice in general, prescription and best practices will be to write good content that a human would like, but
Mhm.
probably structure some elements for bots. So we know from our own research that one of the things that seems to get scraped a lot by ChatGPT, Google, and Perplexity are lists on a company's sort of own website. So a company
Mhm.
may put up a listicle that says, "Tell me about the top 10 um, trail running shoes on the market," and they will
Mhm.
include competitors
Yeah.
in list that's posted on their own blog as if they
Sure.
have any authority or credibility on
Yeah.
this. But those articles are still indexed
Yeah.
by and scraped by ChatGPT and stuff like that. Do I think that that's going to change? Probably it is, because it
Sure.
seems kind of one of those stupid things that we're having at this moment where some company can put up a listicle, put themselves at the top for all they.
Yeah. Well, that's a kind of an old trick that has been done probably more than once in the blogospheres, to be found if through
Yeah,
SEO.
yeah,
Um, and I wonder if that's just a measure of human behavior that if it works, they're going to do more of it. And I think maybe that's pointing to, and you tell me, where that's where we are as with our behavior and how we're using ChatGPT because it's sort of 101 from the user standpoint. We only can get the most that we can get out of it based on what we put into it.
that's right.
So as we're learning to use it in our own ways, those listicles probably are working again
Yeah,
because we're using it in that way, which would probably is gonna change pretty quickly, so they're gonna have to change their tactic.
I think, this is, you make a great point, and you make a point that I think is intuitive for probably most of those listening, and certainly for you and I. Think about how your prompting has even changed since you
Mhm.
first encountered this, whatever it was, 2, 3 years ago or whatever.
Yeah,
Um, Probably it's gotten more detailed. Probably you've added more caveats to it.
yeah,
Probably a little more clarity because you've seen, hey, if I tweak this element of it, I get more quality back, whatever my definition of quality happens to be in the moment. But
right.
yeah, I think that this will change. And I think maybe we're having this moment where it hasn't at all at present. Uh, Probably we're going to see sort of more sophisticated geo programs evolving too, um, based upon understanding that these engines in aggregate tend to scrape specific places, and those places are different from engine to engine. So we
Sure.
know that Google scrapes a lot from the Google ecosystem. So YouTube is heavily scraped in most Google AI overviews. Reddit is often heavily scraped because Google and Reddit have a deal. ChatGPT seems to lean more towards earned media, particularly if I look at a vertical, the one I know about, which is tech.
Mhm.
So there's a little more, you see articles in Tech Radar or Forbes or whatever, a
Yeah.
little more showing up in ChatGPT. So I think as this evolves and as people get a better sense of targets, not only aggregate data around targeting, but targeting specific to the prompts their company cares about and
Mhm.
the AI engines are scraping for those prompts, we're just going to see slightly more refined content and more refined programs.
Yeah, for sure. Give me some examples of how you've seen this play out in the PR space. I'd
Yeah.
be really interested to see, you know, how you're working with your clients and, like, when
Yeah.
you're putting together an article and trying to map that with impact, what does that
Yeah.
all look like?
So it's super interesting. As you can tell from my gray hairs, I've been in the PR game for a little while.
Yeah.
Where when I came up and certainly for much of my career, uh, especially as pertains to tech companies, people would say, "Okay, we want to be in Forbes, we want to be in TechRadar, we want to be in the New York Times, we want to be in TechCrunch." All of those things are extremely valuable, and whether the goal of your PR program is AI search optimization or not, those are still valuable outlets. They carry certain brand equity benefits that will probably never go away because they are prestige media.
Yep.
However, what we see now is that indeed AI engines may be scraping those outlets a heck of a lot over certain queries. But AI engines, regardless of the AI engine, Perplexity, Claude, ChatGPT, whatever, they also are going after tiny sites that and scraping the hell out of tiny sites that no one's ever asked us to put them in. So one
Mhm.
example, we have a keyboard client. They are third in the world in mechanical keyboards. They rank first on AI search. And one of the sites that's heavily scraped for them is a site called Artings. Now, Artings is probably got a million or 2 million UVM. It's not that big,
Mhm.
but it's very honest in how it reviews things. So it reviews products, doesn't take samples, doesn't deal with PR people, doesn't do anything. They've reviewed a lot of our client over the years,
Mhm.
and this has translated to disproportionate benefits in terms of AI search. Again, I bring it up because it's an example of a small website that AI has made the calculation. Hey, this website is speaking truth. It's not BS. It wasn't bought. It wasn't influenced
Mhm.
in a number of ways other sites might be. So we're going to weight it disproportionately, even though you probably never heard of it, even though it's not got huge, unique monthly views or anything like that.
Yeah.
We've also seen it with even smaller sites. So the way we're designing PR targeting, media targeting has completely changed because of what we're seeing these engines scrape.
Mhm. Yeah, it sounds like you do have some structure there. If we could dig into that a little bit more, like, if you're trying to create an article or create content on a website that meets the expectation of this bot or
And
which one of these engines. How do you frame that out? Like, what are the kind of the touch points that you would want to at least think about high level?
sure. So the first thing we do when we think about targeting for AI optimization, so that's one of the major enterprises of PR. I think it's one of the enterprises that's sometimes less understood by non-PR people is that
Mhm.
targeting, deciding who you're going to go after, deciding who you're going to pitch on whatever your piece of news is, sending them a review unit or whatever
Yeah.
is a very important part of the enterprise, and it's a research based thing. So the way we used to do research is we'd say, okay, like who are the most authoritative outlets in this category? Who are the most authoritative writers in this category and reporters? What has driven traffic to websites for our clients in the past? A range of these kind of factors, which are not dead. These are still important factors. But
Yeah.
now we look at kind of what the engines are scraping, and the tool we use for it. There's a lot of AI monitoring tools out there. We've played around with a few, but the one we use and the one we like the most is a tool called Scrunch. It is sort of a subscription tool, like a SaaS product.
Yeah.
We also checked out Muckrack and Evertune and some of the other ones that I think are bigger out there. But the first thing we do is we go plug the client into Scrunch and sort of look at the client and its competitors and what sites the major engines are scraping, particularly the engine that's most relevant to them. And we build the target list from there. So it's less about okay, what does the CEO want? Which is maybe a little bit how it worked in the past. The CEO
Yeah.
said we need to be in tech radar because our competitor was. And
Yeah.
sometimes now we can have a conversation and say, guys, you don't need to be in tech radar at all.
Yeah.
Be over here on this tiny site you never heard, and it's going to power your AI search presence a whole lot better.
Hmm. Okay, so you have an audit. You start with the audit then,
Yeah.
and then what do you end up with? Like maybe some just high points on what do you
Yeah.
end up with in terms of structuring content, and then I want to get into like more of the strategic thinking about all the different aspects of PR and how they could play together.
Sure. So PR touches both kind of what I would say just in the context of the first question.
Yeah.
We are doing obviously media outreach. So I'll just give an example. We might have a keyboard client, okay? And that
Hmm.
keyboard client might have a new keyboard and we want to send it to reviewers at outlets that matter to that keyboard client.
Okay, so influencers. All right,
Influencers and journalists as well.
journalists. Yeah,
And we do both certainly. So
sure.
we might want to look at one of the things we would kind of do operationally after the audit is say, okay, how are we sending this? Who are we sending this to? Well, Johnny writes at Forbes, so for sure we know Forbes is heavily scraped. We're going to send it to Forbes. Jimmy over here writes for some tiny little thing that nobody's ever heard of, but he's relevant. So we are going to send Jimmy a new keyboard too, and he's
Hmm.
going to get the same pitch, the same embargo, the same sort of,
Sure.
we're going to cozy up to him in the same way we would the guy at Forbes, which is completely new. We never used to do things like that
Gotcha.
because
Okay.
small websites didn't matter. We're
Yeah.
also then going to look at around this launch campaign, fictitious launch campaign for a new keyboard. We're going to look at kind of what content is being scraped in a way that we can build specific own content on a client's website. And so there's an audit done and then there's content created around that. And then in the influencer channel, we're going to look at, okay, where are the influencers? What are they talking about? What platforms are they on? And where do we need to go find deals with them? Usually these days, it seems YouTube is the most scraped in terms of like places influencers go. Haven't
Mm,
seen a lot from Instagram. I think this is actually posing a little bit of a threat to kind of Instagram focused influencers
mm,
this brave new world because YouTube is so much more scraped. So we will certainly target specific YouTubers and have very specific instructions about some of the verbal elements around the content they might create, around the videos they might create, because we know the verbal
mhm.
elements, meta tags, stuff like that, descriptions, transcripts are going to be very important in terms of bots and what bots are seeing and putting out.
That's interesting. I like that strategy because it sounds like you've got the data because you did the audit. You
Yeah.
look at these, it may not be the same for every client, but by and large, I think that maps where you look at outliers or smaller sites and you apply, tactics that you've done before with that data in mind. I like that.
Yeah, and this is if I think if people take anything away from AI search's impact on PR,
Mhm.
it is exactly that. That weird small sites that you never would have cared about and that you're going to need to convince somebody actually matter
Mhm.
because people are going to be like, what the hell? I've never even heard of this stupid thing.
Sure.
Why would I bother? They do matter a lot now. And I'll use another example. There is a site, people should go visit this because it's sort of
Yeah.
comical and it gets at exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
There's a site called Doc Universe, Doc DOCK Universe. For whatever reason, for several consumer tech companies, this thing is scraped to high heaven. And I have no idea why. If you look at it, you're like, what even is this?
Mhm.
It has a weird, very not so appealing to humans kind of layout and format, and that might be the very thing, is it wasn't necessarily written for humans.
Yeah.
But this thing showed up in keyboards. This thing showed up in smart eyewear, a range of categories that we touch and have customers in. So it's really interesting.
It's funny because if you try to find it, it's really hard to find, like just Googling it, which is part of the genius of the strategy, I think. Digging into that a little bit more, it's like you could have old sites that are just have high relevancy, or you could have new sites that also have relevancy. But I think it kind of plays to a lot of sponsors that are looking for relatively new content creators because
Yeah.
the old ones are, priced out of the market sometimes, and maybe have lost a little bit of relevancy because that's just the way it goes with us as consumers. When we're if we're like, the first 50, 100,000 subscribers, we
Mm.
feel like we're on board with something new. We want to help, build this thing until they get too big. And then of course we don't like them anymore.
Yeah, that's
We
right.
tear them down.
Yeah.
But that psychology maps, I think, to what you're trying to do.
It's really interesting. And again, it's backed by data, and it's just fascinating that we're in an era in the context of PR targeting where like you need to care about the places you never cared about.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit of a mindset. The other thing I think really when it comes to PR and AI search, you just have to keep your mind open. And a lot of older PR people like myself have had to kind of rethink a lot of things
Mhm.
and rethink how are we measuring value? How are we thinking about specific outlets? How are we thinking about the main things to tell our clients? So certainly, and I was alluding to this before, the notion of signal clarity, the notion of singing from the same hymn book and making sure we don't confuse those ragbots when they go out for answers is really, really important. And is something that I think almost every company needs to audit and probably hasn't done so yet. Is, when we are putting content out into the world, do we say similar things? Do we describe ourselves the same way across social media platforms when we're thinking about a company account or an executive
Yeah.
spot or whatever it is?
So where do you start? And let me tell you kind of one frame of thinking that I have
Mm,
to give you an example. So if you're gonna go work with a client and work on building new content, repurposing old content, you're digging into what they're doing. One way that I look at it is, especially because we help companies with podcasts on the Signal Media side, our agency side, is you can start with these long form conversations with guests,
mm,
and it's a long form video. It's a long form conversation that can be obviously cut up and everything. But then you can take those episodes apart to the degree that they still have merit on, individual clips have merit on their own, and you can create sort of a cascade of content from that. One of those being blog posts, or articles. They can be obviously integrated to your newsletter. That then your newsletter can also be posted on your website.
mm.
So, there's a cascade effect that you start with video, or you start with video and you kind of work backwards to um, meaningful and still authentic written content.
Yeah.
When you work with clients, are you looking at it that way, or are you like a layered kind of strategy, or are you looking at it like, um, we want to take basically one thing and connect it to another?
Yeah.
I mean, tell me your thinking.
So the framework and I guess the heuristic that we use dovetails with what you described. And
Okay.
I have heard it called, I didn't come up with these terms on my own, but
Yeah.
kind of cornerstone and cobblestone.
Okay.
So the idea that there is bigger content that kind of fits under the rubric of a philosophy and
Yeah.
appeals to specific ICPs. And then you can kind of to be more efficient in your content marketing machine, break that out into small chunks and deploy it here, there, and everywhere as
Hmm.
kind of little chunks that get people interested and maybe bring them from the cobblestone to the cornerstone. So that's
Sure.
definitely a philosophy we use. I think sometimes with consumer product companies, you have to do more individual stuff because there are more products being released and it's smaller style campaigns.
Hmm.
But yeah, the philosophy still holds the idea that you can
Okay.
start with something bigger and break it out. And I think that's just generally more efficient. And I think it also leads to greater signal clarity, which is where I began.
Sure, for sure, and I think that's the, pinnacle kind of goal is clarity, because if you have clarity, then you have a lot of other things that kinda map with it.
And
If
we've
you
seen it. Both of us, I'm sure, have seen
Yeah.
this very thing where a business may do 2 or 3 different things. It may
Mhm.
have 2 or 3 different, radically different even ICPs, and that makes it hard
Oh, for
to
sure,
bring it and make it coherent. We
for
have a
sure.
couple of clients that we have one that makes computing peripherals, and they also make office furniture,
Yeah,
ergonomic office furniture. That's a hard challenge to kind of
yeah,
putting together.
yeah.
And we sort of almost do sometimes treat them like different businesses, but it's not easy.
This has been a good conversation for me because I when I think of PR, historically, but even still, in my mind, habitually, I think of like a Forbes, placement in Forbes where they write an article about the business, and it's earned media. It's not paid. But then I can quickly go to, okay, well, paid, publications like that where you're a spot, and there's value to that, of course. But I forget that PR has really become kind of the new SEO to some degree. SEO has lots of different,
Yeah.
people it serves in different ways, but PR is so embedded in SEO that it can be the majority of the thinking and strategizing versus the placements. How do you think about placements with your clients now? Like, do you start with, hey, we need to get you in this industry or vertical publication and then map that back to being found? Or do you start with well, it sounds like you start with the audit and well, how to be found, and then you start looking for placements.
It's a great question, and it does vary based on client goals.
Okay.
So a campaign aimed at pure play brand equity might be different than a
Hmm.
campaign aimed at AI search optimization,
Hmm.
because where we're going to go for brand equity is more kind of legacy things that people
Sure.
put value on. They have specific things they project onto the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal.
Sure. Yeah.
If we're doing an AI search thing, we may not need the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. What is generally happening, though, if I was to kind of characterize where I think PR is going, particularly the earned media part of
Hmm.
PR, is we are moving away from big volume metrics. Get me the most impressions, get me the outlets with the biggest reach. And
Hmm.
we're moving more into sort of surgical strikes where I need this one thing
Hmm.
because I know we're not in there, and maybe it's a listicle in Tom's Guide or something, and our
Yeah.
competitors are. And my data from the back end of my AI monitoring software is saying that this one article is being scraped a lot and we're not there. So we got to find a way to get in there. It's an
Hmm.
article on the best, vertical mice or something like that for a computer. We need to get in there. We're not there. So in general, we're moving from just more and bigger
Yeah.
into we just need these one or two or three little things because they are going to disproportionately return in a way that serves marketing and business goals different than just, hey, look at us, we got this label on the page and it's real sexy.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good to hear.
It's
Um,
nice. It's really
it is,
nice.
especially in the B2B tech world, where essentially you could build a list of your targets, and you could adopt various different marketing methodologies to go after them and sales. But it's good to hear from the PR side that at least you are thinking more surgical like that and more targeted, because I think that's where you find better market fit for your startups
That's
that are
right.
trying to find market fit. I think you find better feedback to find the fit for those
Yeah.
scaling up, which are a lot of people that listen to this podcast. I think that you have the confirmation of fit, and then you can start building these systems around go to market and even brand at some point.
Yeah. And I think the main thing is endless volume, which was the game for so long,
Hmm.
is sort of stupid and purposeless and not necessarily going to lead to outcomes,
Sure.
because endless volume is just always more and more volume. And now we're in an era where it's like we could say we put you here and this
Mhm.
is doing this, and we know that this is the new window of discovery on the internet and all that. So
Yeah.
it's a fun time, it's a heady time, and if you ever get around a lot of PR people, they can't shut up about it.
So true. Well, this is great. Thanks for coming on the show. It's been very revealing for me, and I've learned a lot. So I appreciate that.
Absolute
Uh,
pleasure. Thank you.
if people want to come find you, where should we send them?
Properpropaganda.net, and I am on LinkedIn as Jackson Wightman, Wightman.
Cool. Well, thanks a lot, Jackson. This has been a good conversation.
Thank you, Lee.